Rexha versus Anduin.
The light shall bring victory.
Let the hunt begin.
Have you seen this man? You clicked on the video, so I'm guessing you have. I'm also guessing you don't really know what to do about that fact. I mean, No Face is a weird character. People love him. I see him all over the place, about as often as I see Studio Ghibli's actual mascot, Totoro. But there's always this sense of detachment in the way that people talk about him. Unlike Totoro, it's pretty hard to imagine giving No Face a hug.
Alright, let me paint you a picture. It's 2026 and Bitcoin goes on a parabolic run all the way to $500,000. And then suddenly it crashes, dropping 80% in the span of a few months. Sounds impossible, right? You probably think I'm trying to rage bait you into views, but I swear I'm not. Because here's the thing. It's not just me talking about this scenario. You also got one of the most famous contrarians on Wall Street, David Hunter, calling for something similar. You see, he thinks we will have a massive melt-up, with the S&P going to 9,000 and the NASDAQ going to 30,000, followed by a brutal 80% crash. Now, before you write him off as just some crazy guy trying to get views, well, let me set the record straight. You see, David Hunter's got 52 years of experience on Wall Street. He's managed real institutional money and has nailed some of the craziest calls in recent history. For example, he called the collapse of oil prices in 2014, the collapse of treasury yields in 2018, and even the V-shaped recovery in 2020. So point is, when he makes a call, we should all take it seriously. And that's why in this video, I'm gonna lay out a realistic path for how this melt-up scenario could actually play out. And look, by the end of this video, if you still think that I'm trying to bait you for views, then just call me out in the comments and I'll personally apologize. Alright, but before we get into this wild scenario, we gotta take a look at where we are now. So Bitcoin's had an amazing year, right? And it's still sitting close to all-time highs. Meanwhile, stocks have had an even better year, with the S&P and NASDAQ setting new highs almost every month. So if you only look at the charts, it seems like everything's great, right? But here's the thing, if you look past all the headlines and those shiny government numbers, there's actually a whole lot of shakiness underneath. I mean, just check this out. US consumer debt is at a record high. Credit card debt, also a record high. Corporate bankruptcies, the highest it's been in 14 years. And small business confidence, completely in the gutter. So while everything might look amazing on the surface, if you dig just a little deeper, you'll start to see cracks everywhere. Okay, but how do we get from this shaky all-time highs to a full-on melt-up that sends Bitcoin to 500K and stocks vertical too? Well, to put it simply, rate cuts. You see, Jerome Powell and the Fed have been super hesitant to cut rates lately, but President Trump has made it loud and clear that he wants rate cuts and he wants them now. Here's the thing, sooner or later he's gonna get his way. After all, Powell's out as Fed chair in May of 2026, and Trump already has some hand-picked successors who will definitely do what he wants. So, when we finally get aggressive cuts, potentially even a 300 basis point cut, well, that's the rocket fuel that kicks off the melt up. By the way, this isn't just some wild what if scenario, by the way, because we've actually seen similar things happen in the past. Like every time the Fed has slashed rates while things were shaky, the market's gone absolutely nuts. In 1982, the Nasdaq doubled in less than a year. From 1998 to 2000, Greenspan cut rates and the S&P ripped over 50% while the tech bubble went crazy. And more recently, in 2020, we had those emergency cuts that led to the fastest doubling of the S&P in 75 years. So point is, this scenario I'm describing could absolutely happen once again. And if it does, get ready for a melt-up of historic proportions. Now, if you're still not convinced that a melt-up could happen, then hold up, because I still have 2 more points for you to consider. First of all, this cycle has largely been different from ones in the past. And a big reason why is that it's mostly been institutions running the show. Like, we really haven't seen any of the usual signs of euphoria or even general interest from retail for Bitcoin and crypto. However, here's where things get crazy. Because right now, there's $7 trillion parked in money market funds. And all that cash is just sitting there earning yield. But the problem is, as rates fall, their money earns less and less. So when the Fed starts cutting rates, all that money starts hunting for better returns. And suddenly, everyone who's been waiting on the sidelines rushes back in. Easy money starts piling into everything. I'm talking Bitcoin, stocks, altcoins, commodities, you name it. The riskier the better. And that's how we get to a wild number like $500,000 Bitcoin. Because at that point, even the die-hard bears capitulate and end up chasing the rally because nobody wants to be left behind. Alright, but we gotta be real here because all bubbles eventually pop. The question is just when and how. Well, for me, it all comes down to one thing: sticky inflation. You see, when the Fed cuts rates and easy money returns, it's not just the asset prices that take off. No, people also start spending like crazy, buying houses, cars, Rolexes, you name it. All that wealth and FOMO spills into the real economy. But the problem is, that causes prices to rise, and then we get sticky, demand-driven inflation as a result. Now, what happens next is that the bond market starts to freak out. Bond investors see their returns getting eaten away, so they dump their bonds, and that causes yields to spike. So that's essentially the market's way of saying that the Fed has lost control, and at that point, they are forced to make a move. So they come out swinging with an emergency rate hike, desperate to look tough and calm down the bond market. But by then, it's too late. All that leverage and euphoria flips on a dime, and the sell-off turns into a full-blown chaos. Now, like I said before, this isn't some crazy hypothetical situation that I made up. No, there's actually a real-world example of this happening. Just look at the early 1980s. Paul Volcker, the Fed chair at the time, hiked rates all the way up to 20% to kill inflation. But it absolutely nuked the markets and economy as a result. They got 2 recessions back to back, and stocks and jobs were also destroyed. So when the Fed slams the brakes, nothing is safe. But honestly, this time, it could be even worse because margin debt is currently at an all-time high at over $1 trillion. That's more leverage than we had at the top of the dot-com bubble. And in the crypto space, we got all those treasury companies using leverage and financial engineering to buy Bitcoin or some other coin, right? So when markets start to roll over, all that borrowed money turns into forced selling and margin calls. And that's how you get a real waterfall. A fast and brutal drop that could easily turn into